It was actually strange. I came home from work and she was upstairs talking on the phone. I yelled hello and she said she was talking to her mom, and then she closed the bathroom door so I could not hear anymore. Here is the strange part. It was as if someone invisible was standing behind me and whispered she's lying and quat. It was early 2000s and we had a landline and cordless phones with a base station. An image instantly came into my head of our base station and I just walked into the room with the base station, hit mute, and turned on the speaker. I heard her talking to a guy and could tell from the conversation they had been intimate for a while, and they were talking about when I would be working next. I didn't say anything, just talked to a lawyer and filed for divorce. When I told her I knew and that she would be getting papers, she just started openly dating the other guy, so it was the right decision. Way late and it's gonna get buried and I'm on mobile, so yay. It was June 2018 when the Spider-Verse trailer came out and properly introduced the movie. I talked to my, at the time, girlfriend about it. We'll call her Jess because that was her name. We agreed to go when it came out on December 14th. Well, in the preceding months we started to drift apart. She started to text me less often and call even less. We essentially ceased having sex and we grew apart, which in hindsight should have been my biggest clue, but I was too stupid and too in love to acknowledge what was happening. Late November or early December, I forget which month, rolled around and I saw on her Snapchat story that she was at a Walmart and was wearing a pleather jacket that was like 2 sizes too big for her, which looked odd to me because I wore, and still do, a size medium and this jacket looked like a large or XL. I brushed that aside too because callback, I'm stupid. The 14th of December rolled around and I had just been fired from my job, so I was on the hunt for a new one before the new year and I texted Jess to set up a date to see Spider-Verse. Jess, I saw it already. And quat. Me, oh, okay. I wanted to see it too. Who'd you go with? Why not invite me? Jess, I went with a friend from work, he paid and I didn't think about inviting you. And quat. That was when I knew she was cheating on me. I should have dumped her right there, but I didn't. A week or so later and my best friend got back from Air Force school in Texas and I took him out to a hookah lounge and texted Jess after we'd been there for a bit to see if she wanted to join us, and she texted back with "You're going to hate me," which I knew was going to be the breakup text. She dumped me over text with my buddy in front of me while we sucked on hookah pipes for the rest of the night. We met up for coffee 3 or so days later to talk it out and she was well and truly moved into this new guy. Looking back, there were plenty of times when I saw what was going on and I should have just broken it off. But I was stupid and naive about what was happening, so in the end I'm partially to blame, I believe at least. When I got divorced, my alcoholic wife of 18 years had started another affair, this time with her addictions counselor, my lawyer, and I laid a trap for them. Just in case you don't know, intimate relations between a counselor and patient are very frowned upon by the regulatory bodies, and I was more than pissed after putting her through rehab, $25,000 which I didn't have to do, only to have her fall back into her old behavior. Shortly before the divorce was finalized, I filed a complaint with the state body licensing health professions. Knowing they were in some peril because of their unprofessional relationship, I had already gotten him fired from a major teaching hospital. She had backed off her exorbitant demands. I paid her a very modest settlement, kept the house, got custody of the 3 teenage kids, plus got child support. Her lawyer naturally included a clause in the divorce where I had to agree to not say anything negative about her lover and their relationship. But the lawyer fucked up and never asked if I had already filed charges and thus didn't require me to rescind them. Her lawyer had assumed I was just bad-mouthing them to neighbors and friends, and it never occurred to the lawyer that we were doing much more. When the Board of Health Professions responded to my complaint shortly after the divorce was finalized, I told them that it would take a subpoena to get me to testify. A subpoena trumps an agreement in a divorce settlement. They were happy to oblige. They stripped his license, and placed him on a register of sanctioned health professionals. He never worked again. They were broke in a handful of years and she divorced him when the money ran out. In the interim his mother had died, leaving a fair-sized estate, so it took longer than I expected. Oh, and the frosting on the cake was that his wife and I traded notes, notably hotel receipts from the time of their affair, that helped each of us in our respective divorces. Justice was served. I canceled on a party her friends were having because I worked late. My boss let me out a few hours early because it was dead. So I went to the party, got there and asked her cousin where she was. Her cousin said she in her car out front on the phone. And quat. As I walked away to go to the car, her cousin panicked and said no, wait, she's in the bathroom ! And quat. Me knowing she was lying, I jogged to my GF's car out front, looked in the window and she was pantless, being finger blasted by one guy and blowing another guy in the back seat. That was 10 years ago. Now she's a mother to 4 fatherless children and I'm engaged to her beautiful, Latina ex-best friend. Here's my long one. He went out with some friends and never came home that night. I woke up at 4 a.m. to find him not home. I tried to call him but his phone went straight to VM. I called his buddy, he said he left hours ago. I thought something horrible happened. So I called hospitals and police stations thinking the worst. After 4 hours I called his parents who lived in NC to let them know he was missing. Decided to drive around to the bars he frequented. Saw my friend's car was left at the bar. Gut feeling told me to drive by her house. She was a bartender at said bar. Found his car in her driveway. Banged on door, found him and her together. Called his parents, let them know he wasn't dead, just cheating on me. Shitty side note. My friend had been bragging to me that some guy was showing up at the bar and buying her flowers and texting her all kinds of cute shit. Well, turns out it was my boyfriend of 5 years the whole time. I caught my boyfriend of 2 years. He had asked me to proofread his paper on his Mac and the text messenger popped up in the right hand. He was sitting in his bed texting some girl good night, I love you, while sitting right next to me in his bed. I deleted his entire paper, wrote who's Marissa, saved it and told him it looks great and left. She was his girlfriend of 8 years who lived next to his parents 2 hours away. My boyfriend and I had met online well over 6 years ago through an online game by the name of RuneScape. He was 14 and I was 17, but it had felt like we had been friends forever. We both played the game very often and connected through it, eventually leading us to start a long-distance relationship. Things began to escalate as the years went on and we began seeing each other in person every few months or so. We were about 1,500 miles apart, so one of our main priorities for the future was moving in together and closing the distance. My job had prevented us from doing that, but we had finally set a date for me to move in with him in December of this year. Our relationship never had any serious issues and I was more than happy to have him in my life as he was happy to have me. As I got older, I began to play RuneScape less and less, as work took up most of my time. He continued to play regularly, if not more than he had when I first met him. He could never really hold down a job and barely had an income, but I supported him throughout the years and even paid his rent from across the country after he moved out of his parents' house a few years ago. I never really minded it because he was a sweetheart, but we began to have problems. In November of last year, I couldn't help pay his monthly rent. I was short on cash after having to pay my own living expenses alongside car repairs and bills I owed to the state, and I just couldn't afford to support him at the time. When I called him one night to discuss it, he freaked out and started crying that he didn't want to live with his parents again. I tried calming him down and even suggesting that I could help him find a temporary job until I could start providing for him again, but he wasn't having it. He claimed his parents would abuse him if he returned home, which I know for a fact isn't true because him and his parents have stayed with me several times. They've given him the world. I eventually did calm him down, but he remained passive-aggressive the entire night and we eventually hung up. Because I cared about him, I reached out to his father the next day and informed him that he would probably be moving back home after his lease expired that month. I explained how I wouldn't be able to afford paying for his living for a month or two and if there were any local jobs he could work in order to, make an income. Apparently, a friend of his father needed help managing a small warehouse for his business and was looking to potentially hire my boyfriend for the season. It paid $15 per hour and was super easy, lifting boxes, sweeping the floors, and taking inventory. I brought it up to my boyfriend that same night and he was not having it. Not only did he not want to work in a shitty warehouse, but he didn't want to work at all. All he planned to do day in, day out was play RuneScape. I brought up a few other job listings I had found in his area and he immediately shot all of them down as well. He then had the audacity to comment about how he thinks I should work harder and possibly work a second job. I kept my composure and simply argued against it until we eventually hung up. I collapsed on my bed and cried for a good hour or two afterwards because of the intense emotional stress I was under. Not only do I work 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, I'm also an industrial meteorologist. If I remember correctly, that's a lot more work than playing RuneScape every day and using my Hulu account. I really considered breaking up with him right that moment, but I changed my mind and decided to give him another chance. Looking back on it, big mistake. I messaged him throughout the night and we sort of made up, but I was still a little uneasy about the entire event. He had moved back with his parents by the time December had come and I began to help him look for jobs while he wasted his life away playing video games. I eventually persuaded him to start working at a small retail store near his house and he thankfully began to make some money. I would still buy him video games and transfer him money like normal because I spoiled him, and our relationship began to feel somewhat okay again. Last month, both him and I put our money together to fly him across the US to stay with me for 4 days. We hadn't seen each other in person since last summer, so we were both looking forward to it. He arrived and we had a great time for the first few days because he could actually take me on dates for once with his new income. Everything was perfect until I caught a glimpse of his phone's lock screen while he was taking a shower. "When are you gonna leave her?" the Discord message read. I could have ran into the bathroom and snapped his neck in that moment, but I kept myself together as best as I could without killing him. I had never felt so used, disrespected, or hated in my entire life. When he came out of the bathroom, I gave him a fake smile, but I genuinely hated him from that moment on. He could have dropped dead on the floor and I would have spit on him. I spent the remainder of the night watching him play RuneScape and I remained very quiet. He took notice of this and asked me if everything was okay, and I lied and told him I was fine. When it came time to go to sleep, I let that fucker climb into bed with me and he tried initiating sex because it was our final night together. I rejected as politely as I could without tearing his member completely off. He was disappointed, but went out like a light. Immediately after he went to sleep, I reached over and unplugged his phone and started digging through his messages with that girl. I feared that I had misinterpreted the message I had seen, but I was completely right after all. Not only had he been cheating on me, he had been doing so for nearly 6 months, leading me to believe that he hooked up with another girl directly after I couldn't pay for his living in November. I scrolled through probably 100,000 messages and wanted to vomit my insides out by the end of it. He had talked shit about me, claimed I was emotionally abusive, just as he had done with his parents, and even sent this girl my nudes so they could pick me apart physically. When morning came, I had slept in because of how late I was up reading his messages. I woke up to find him on my computer playing RuneScape and eating my food. It was like all of our relationship had been wiped from my mind and he was now an evil stranger sitting in my house. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tear him apart and kick him out of my house onto the street, but I didn't. In fact, I gave him as much love and attention as I could muster that morning because I wanted to leave things feeling normal between us. I dropped him off at the airport and we had a quick and somber goodbye before I left him forever, unbeknownst to him. I drove back home as calmly as I could before crying my eyes out in a mix of complete anger and emotional pain. I ended up kicking my bed frame so hard that the wood split and I had to buy another one recently. If only it were his face. I wanted to break his heart by the time he arrived back home, but I wanted it to really hurt. I logged into our joint RuneScape account that we had made several years ago, where him and I would work on training the same account and raising it almost like our baby in quad. We had always joked that if we were to ever split up, he would take half of the account's bank contents and I would take the rest. I took my half and transferred it to my main account before taking his half and giving it away to random people throughout the game. Every last bit of it. Even items I couldn't normally trade away, I used a spell to convert the items into coins which I then gave away as well. The bank was now empty. It then occurred to me that I had the credentials to his main account were written down in my desk, as he would frequently have me train his farming skill every so often. I didn't hesitate at all and logged into his precious 14-year-old RuneScape account. I immediately took all of the contents of his bank and sold it all on the Grand Exchange, a marketplace in the game. It took an extremely long time to clear out his bank, but he would still be flying home for about another 4 hours, so I had plenty of time. By the time I had sold/destroyed everything, I had 4 stacks of coins totaling over 8.5 billion. Now what to spend it on? I wanted to waste his life earnings on the most useless, stupid thing I could think of, besides him. I logged back into my main account to reach out to a friend of mine that collects massive stacks of burnt food. For the unaware, burnt food in RuneScape has no use. You can't unburn them, eat them, or even sell them on the Grand Exchange. They are, however, tradable amongst players. I've always poked fun at this guy for collecting burnt food, but I was now more thankful than ever to make his acquaintance in my revenge. I asked him what the most obscure, unwanted item was of the burnt food variety was and he replied burnt spider and quat. Lo and behold, he had roughly 6,000 of the item spider on shaft, burnt, in his bank that he was willing to sell me. Feeling generous with my ex-boyfriend's coins, I gave my friend a full stack of 2.147 billion coins and left a very happy customer. I dropped the 6,083 burnt spiders in his bank, but still had about 6 billion coins left to spend. With the remaining money, I decided to treat myself. I went onto the Grand Exchange and ended up going on a shopping spree. The first thing I bought were 100 bonds. If you're not familiar, a bond in RuneScape grants you 14 days of in-game membership. After trading all 100 bonds to my account, I now have almost 4 years of membership paid for me. I spent a majority of his coins on extremely nice armor and weapons, all of which went straight into my account. He still had about an extra billion, so I spent it on the supplies I needed to level up an expensive skill of mine. By the end of the afternoon, he was left with a measly 150,000 coins in his bank, all of which I gave away to a guy cooking pizzas outside of the exchange. Nothing was left, so I decided to pick up a pile of bones off the ground and leave it solely in his bank. It might sound petty, but I laughed for a while. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is so cruel, you ruined the tens of thousands of hours he had put into a game. Well, it was time he learned that I can be a bitch, a mean bitch. On top of spending every last coin he had ever made, I leveled his defense skill. This may not sound bad, in fact, it sounds like a good thing. I helped his account progress, right? Well, no. Unfortunately for my ex, he had what players commonly refer to as a pure account, meaning he never, ever dared to level his defense skill from level 1, in order to keep the lowest defense stats but have high offensive stats. Well, not anymore. Have fun with your permanent level 6 defense. Cycling through hundreds of possible forms of revenge in my head, I settled on getting rid of his house. It's quite an achievement in RuneScape to have a nice house of your own. In fact, he had one of the nicest I had ever seen in the game. In order to have built it, he must have spent well over a few billion coins. Too bad I had disassembled it all in a matter of minutes, deleting it all into cyberspace. And there's no insurance either. He's going to have to rebuy everything with his non-existent money if he wants a new house. Bye bye, Casa de Cheater. Scrolling through his friends list, I decided to act as him and pay a visit to his friends who were currently online and admit that I had cheated on my girlfriend and was fully proud of it. If his friends hadn't removed him by that point, I removed them. All of them. Lastly, to add a beautiful little cherry to this revenge-filled cake, I changed his username. You're able to change your username once a month on RuneScape, so I changed his to let everybody know that he's a dirty cheater. I obviously won't drop his username here, but I did the best I could to embarrass him with a 12-character limit. He should be able to reclaim his previous username in about 3 weeks, but if he waits too long, I'll be able to swipe it and slap it on a throwaway account of my own forever. He sent me a very hateful and aggressive message later that night, followed by pictures of him crying. I wrote him a sincere message officially ending the relationship, while also scaring him away by threatening to take him to court over sharing my nudes and possibly filing a cease and desist if he were to contact me anytime soon. I don't plan on doing any of that, I just don't want to speak to him ever again. TL.Dr. Boyfriend of 5 years that I had financially supported for everything decided to cheat on me and spread my nudes. I wasted his RuneScape riches on 6,000 dead spiders and completely trashed his 14+ years of effort, leaving him with nothing to show for but a shameful username. Edit. Wow, I really didn't expect this to blow up as much as it did lol. To clarify, this post is referring to old school RuneScape rather than RuneScape 3. We met playing RS3 but immediately put all of our focus into old school when it first released. He even transferred 90% of his RS3 worth over to old school through bots and such, making this revenge even sweeter. So while his old school account is only 6 years old, as is mine, his fortunes were the collective effort of a previous 8 years on RS3. Thank you so much for the Reddit gold. I don't know what to do with it, but I'm glad I've given you a revenge boner. We had been dating for 8 months. One night, while we were out to dinner, she got a phone call. Apparently, her fiancé had just been in a terrible motorcycle accident and he hadn't survived the ambulance journey. This was devastating news, and when she told me, I was shocked. At the time, I was in college, so my schedule was chaotic, and I guess that gave her free time to be sneaky with another guy. After her confession, I got the bill, made sure she called an Uber, and never spoke to her again. I owned a house with my fiancé. I woke up in the middle of the night and he wasn't in bed. I went searching. His truck and another vehicle were in the driveway. Then, I went upstairs and found the guest bedroom was locked. After barging my way in, I found him with another woman in bed. That bed happened to be my childhood bed. He forced me out of the room. Literally grabbed me by the neck and pushed me out and closed the door back. I knew I couldn't do anything at that point, so I called his parents who lived a few blocks away. His dad showed up and another fight broke out. I ended up leaving and staying at his parents until dawn. I moved out that weekend and let the house foreclose. 9 years later. It's finally off my credit report. I'm happily married to an amazing man and we own a beautiful home together. I decided I would tell my partner I wanted to break up while I was at my parents' house for Christmas. At that point in our relationship, he was a workaholic and super distant. For the past 2 years, it felt like nothing I said or did even matter to him. I tried to talk about how unhappy I was, but it just didn't faze him. The last conversation I tried to have with him involved him interrupting me with a giggle fit because he started thinking about how funny and cute a basket full of kittens would be in quad. I didn't think he would even blink reading my message about separation, but he actually told me he'd like for us to work on our relationship. He hadn't booked off any time for Christmas, so I was alone. I felt terrible that I had left my parents. When I was opening presents with them on FaceTime, his iPad notifications were going off loudly in the background. I went to turn down the volume and I was shocked to see the messages on the screen. They were all from one of his old coworkers and something felt off. I opened up their chat and read the whole thing. Turns out, he'd been planning to cheat for months while I was away. Besides her, there were 2 other coworkers he was talking to flirtatiously, one of which had children closer to his age. I confronted him and he lied. He also tried to erase his text messages on his phone, not realizing that they don't get erased on the iPad regardless. This literally happened to me last weekend. Also not the first time I've been cheated on, but I thought this guy I was going to marry, and I never saw it coming. When we first started dating, I remember 3 condoms, the kinds from the gas station small box, being in his nightstand. We had gotten tested together and I'm on birth control in our relationship, so I thought, was monogamous, so we didn't use condoms. Last weekend I had a fucking weird pit in my stomach feeling. I checked the nightstand and the box is empty. No condoms. Something led me to the closet, call it female intuition. I see the book bag he used to bring to my place whenever he stayed and thought, he hasn't used that bag in a while. It was an overnight bag, had clothes he had worn, and had at least 6 to 10 sex toys placed in individual Ziploc bags, and they had obviously been used. I would like to note that my boyfriend never told me he was into toy play or anything, so obviously I knew he cheated. Then I see the empty condom wrappers. Then I find a secret dresser with 3 drawers full of so many sex toys and devices I didn't know what half of them were. He had cheap lingerie in there and a bunch of role-play costumes. I confronted him. He denied it at first. His body language gave him away. Finally admitted the truth. He invited a girl from his past to drive 2 hours just to get a hotel and fuck her in it. He had no intention of telling me. Go to the gym, no headphones. That's cool, house is 5 minutes away. Pull up in front of my house and see work buddy's car out front. Walk in the house through an open garage. Sun coloring at the kitchen table. Ask him, hey bud, where's your mom? He points at the stairs. Walk to the stairs to hear moans and movement. Up to this point I had suspected the worst but never had proof. Knew I had to go look and catch her or she would say I was overreacting and tell me it wasn't what I thought. Walk upstairs and hear them in the spare bedroom. Walk in the room and say, well, this is awkward and quat. They freak out and try to grab clothes and tell me nothing is happening. I walk out to my car and have ex-buddy chase me out and tell me to hit him. I go to my command. I'm in the armed forces. The next day. Report him and have the command force him to call his wife that day and let her know. I am now divorced and much happier. My ex was married. I didn't know. I was told he was divorced and everyone backed him up on it, even though I found out later it was a lie. He got caught when we went out dancing and his wife's friend saw us dancing and kissing and took a picture to send to her. I found out after seeing the look on his face when she texted him the photo later that evening. I obviously ended it with him and carried on. The twist? I ran into his wife at the same club a couple months later and we ended up taking a picture together and sent it to him just to fuck with him. When I was 13, so 8 years ago, my dad remarried after divorcing my mom 4 years before. Before the divorce, his fiancée had been his mistress. My mom is completely better off without him, and ignoring the fact that I wouldn't exist. I don't think she should have married him in the first place. Even if I think my parents weren't a good match, that's no excuse to cheat on your wife. Even worse, this new woman was horrifically vile in all sorts of ways. She constantly belittled me, made fun of the fact I needed to take pills for my mental illness despite her being a freaking pharmacist, and was generally awful to my siblings and me. But she was a decade younger than my dad and reasonably hot, so he didn't care at all how she treated us. The one time he actually listened to us about her is when they were thinking of having a baby, and my brother said he'd ask our mom to sue for full custody of us if they did. So anyway, they got married. I was a bridesmaid, cause that witch had no real friends. The other 2 bridesmaids were her sister and my sister. My brother was the best man because she didn't like my dad's best friend. He and my dad still don't talk to this day, even though the guy was like an uncle to me as a little kid. It was a wedding, though, and everything went normally at first. But at the beginning of the reception, before the first dance, we were taking pictures in front of a chocolate fountain, looking like the happy family we never were and would never be. I'm on the autism spectrum and have a problem maintaining eye contact. This extends to looking at a camera. So when we had to retake a photo because I wasn't looking, she leans down and whispers something in my ear. I'm not going to repeat it, but it involved the R word. I don't like saying it. I snapped and decided she was going to pay for this. No one noticed, or at least no one called me out when I started slowly moving the chocolate fountain towards the edge of the table. When it got to the edge, it makes contact with the back of that pure white wedding dress and slowly drips down. By the time she notices, it looks like she's pooped herself. But for all anyone else knows, this was an accident. She has no spare dress, and that stain is not coming out. So first dance, cutting the cake, speeches, everything. This woman has what looks like a poop stain on the back of her dress. It was a small revenge, but it was so worth it. What's supposed to be the happiest day of this stupid woman's life, and she's going to remember that stain every time she thinks about it. They never did get the stain out, and nobody knew it was me. Until now, I guess. Hi family, if you're reading this, Susie, you're a witch and you deserve that chocolate stain. Had a suspicion that the wife was seeing someone else. She had been acting off for about a week. We would be sitting on the couch and she would get text messages claiming to be from a female friend, yet she would always set the phone face down. A few nights later she tells me that she is going to go cover a shift for a nurse coworker who just had a miscarriage and that she would be working late. That night I woke up out of a dead sleep with my heart racing, with just a feeling that something was wrong. I snuck over to her side of the bed, took her phone and went out into the living room to go through her text messages. Sure enough, she had detailed plans to meet up some guy at a hotel to fuck. I took photos of the text with my phone as future evidence. I went back to bed, returned her phone and just laid there contemplating my next steps. I finally just laid awake for about 4 hours until it was time for me to get up for work. I knew they were planning on meeting in the afternoon at the hotel, so when I arrived at work I told my boss that I needed a half day and possibly a few days off afterwards. About an hour before their planned meet-up time, I drove to my brother-in-law's house. I let him know what was going on and asked to borrow his truck so that I could witness their arrival with my own eyes. He made me promise not to confront them. I showed up at the hotel parking lot and about 30 minutes later, they both arrive in his truck. She was dressed in her work outfit. After they went in, I snuck around to his truck and deflated all his tires, not slashed because that's a bigger crime. She had carefully planned to cover her tracks. She took our 2 kids to the babysitter dressed in her scrubs to appear like she is going to work. Then drove her car to the parking garage to have him pick her up there, knowing I might drive by her work to see if her car was there. I left the hotel, went back home, piled every picture we had ever taken together along with photos of our kids on the kitchen table. I packed a bag for myself and the girls and drove down to my hometown to stay with some friends. On the way there, I called the hotel and asked to be connected to the room under her name. She answered and I don't remember exactly what I said, but something to the effect of I know where you are and I know what you're doing ... and quad. She wasn't really fazed until she heard our girls in the backseat laughing and signing. Then she broke down and begged me to come back. I told her we needed a few days away and that they deserve a better mother than her and hung up. She called me constantly and I just sent it straight to voicemail for the next few days. We were at a party together with a bunch of close friends. She said she wasn't feeling that well, and my buddy was leaving early because he had to work in the morning, so he could take her home. Fair enough, we're all friends, we help each other out. I had a weird feeling in my gut, so when I left the party, I made a quick stop at my girlfriend's place. As I entered the cul-de-sac, I saw my buddy's car parked in front of her house with lights off. So I turned my car's lights off and slowly crept over. Then I was about 20 feet away, so I zoomed over and stopped right in front of his car, and I blasted on the high beam lights as I did this. At that moment, I saw them pull away from a kiss. I pulled up to the side of his car and we both rolled down our windows and I just asked how things are going. They didn't look me in the eyes. Then I just drove home. That was it for our relationship. I found out due to technology. It unfolded in front of me. She was on her phone, and I was logged in on her desktop. She had 2 monitors and Facebook was open on one of them. I knew we had been having some trouble but saw her asking a friend if she could stay with them indefinitely. Afterward, I found her chat with another friend of hers about how she was planning on getting papers for a divorce. We went out to lunch. She wasn't even able to hold a conversation. I had to repeat myself multiple times because she was so enticed in whatever hilarious thing she was reading. Asked her what was so funny and she just kept saying nothing. As I was on my way to dropping her off at her place, her phone, sitting in the cup holder, started ringing. The number wasn't registered in her contacts. I went to answer it expecting a telemarketer or someone who simply had the wrong number with the intent of messing with them to have some fun. I went to grab the phone. She has never had a problem with me answering calls like that before. She even found it entertaining. Anyways, she freaking attacked me, started screaming at me, and ripped the phone from my hand. We didn't speak for the rest of the ride. Needless to say, it was obvious what was going on. Shame. Turns out it was my only friend at the time. Lost 2 people I thought I could trust that day. Just got on a flight in London headed to Vegas. Sitting next to my GF, and she wants to show me something she has planned for the trip, so she gets out her phone. It opens to the messages and shows a chat with a guy, I know him, saying how much she is gonna miss him and how she doesn't want to go away with me anyway. The door's close on the plane. That was a really freaking fun 10 to 11 hours. I caught my wife after she passed from cancer. It was the worst feeling ever. I was caught between unending love, mourning, and absolute anger. I found out through her phone that she was overly protective of during treatment. A week before she passed, she took the passwords off her phone so that I could respond to her texts and take care of her business. Maybe a week or 2 after she passed, I explored her phone and found numerous texts, emails, and cheating messages. I had suspicions about my wife for a while, but the confirmation came in the form of a voicemail from the other guy's wife. The message said she thought I should know my wife was sleeping with her husband. If I had any questions to ask my wife and she wished me well. The truth came out later as I played the voicemail for my wife. I had suspicions for a long time that my ex-husband was cheating, and the red flags looking back are clear as day, but at the time it always got twisted around that I was just a paranoid crazy person. Then at work one night, my phone rings, and I didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number. Immediately after, my husband calls and sounds super freaked out and says, "You're about to get a phone call, don't answer it. It's all lies." WTF? What are you talking about? Melissa's boyfriend is drunk and thinks we've been sleeping together and he's going scorched earth trying to ruin us because he made this up in his head. And quad. Aha. So I call the number that just called me. He is not drunk and found the texts and pictures on her phone and offered to send me the screenshots. I didn't want to see, But I believed him, thanked him, called my husband back and told him he better not be at home when I get home in the morning. I was 8 months pregnant with our second child at the time and he wanted to go visit his brother for the weekend. I asked my doctor if it was safe for me to travel and she said it would be fine. I told my husband I could go but he said he was really hoping to just have some time with his brother. I understood because a new baby really makes it hard to spend quality time, but I asked if he could take our older son, 3 at the time, so he could see his grandma and cousins. He said they were planning on drinking and whatnot and wasn't sure it would be a good idea. They're country boys so think shooting, drinking and whatnot. I agreed and he left for the weekend. After he left I get a call from his best friend telling me that he'll be in town for the weekend and he wanted to meet up. Not weird he called me because my husband was terrible at answering his phone. I told him unfortunately my husband was visiting back home, bad timing. His best friend then said okay, I'm going to call you back, and hung up very abruptly. Turns out my husband and his wife had been caught by him a few months previously and he gave them a chance to make it right. I don't know why. He didn't tell me but threatened to if they didn't stop. Well, they didn't stop and he told me. I think the worst part was that my husband's family knew and never once thought to tell me. These people were my family for 5 years and nothing. It's been almost 10 years now and I'm so much happier, but it was definitely an eye-opening experience. My husband passed away suddenly. He kept all of our old phones. I wanted to look through them, his and mine, to see the texts we sent to each other and remember the great times. I found a phone number that had been calling him repeatedly in the morning on the way to work and at night on the way home. The first initial and last name were on his phone under contacts. I searched his email with that name and found out he had been having an affair. I'm still not sure for how long, somewhere between 18 months and 3 years. Devastating. Was the night of her company Christmas party. I had to stay home and babysit our 5-year-old son. Grandma was supposed to, but she fell and was in the hospital with a broken hip. I figured wife would go and then come home early. Turns out, she was planning to stay the night at a hotel so she could drink and not worry about driving. And quat. I woke up about 3 a.m. just knowing something was wrong, never happened before, and checked find my phone to see where she was. She was with her boss at his apartment. Pretty much sucked. It happened to a friend of mine. We were all on vacation, about 7 friends, and everybody was drinking. We were the only 2 who didn't. He managed to snag his girlfriend's phone while she was passed out and pulled me to the side. He said, "She's cheating on me. Some guy named Joey has been texting her and meeting her after work for sex every day and quat." We ended up searching for names and mutual friends via Facebook. Turned out Joey was a girl. Was dating a girl in college and didn't think she was cheating. Another guy she was dating thought she was. He found my info in her phone and texts me about it. He wants to confront her. We both meet up at her place while she isn't home. He's a nice guy and we honestly got along pretty well for the half hour we talked before she arrived. She saw us both as she drove up and the look on her face was shock. By the time she got out of her car she was crying but didn't say a word to us. We went in her apartment and her roommate acted as the mediator but it didn't really get anywhere. Me and the other guy were pissed and wanted answers. We weren't getting any so we both gave her some choice words and rolled out. Showed up to the police station to bail him out. I had no idea why he'd been arrested, but assumed it was drinking and driving. Again. He was a wicked alcoholic, and I was naive and painfully codependent. Was signing forms to pay a bail bondsman. I was naive and didn't realize that a $50,000 bail, which ended up being about a $3,000 bond, cash, was not what one would have for a DUI. Behind me, I heard the bondsman talking to a woman. He asked her how she knew my now ex. "We're dating," she said. I stopped filling out the form, turned around, and asked, "Who are you?" Exactly ? And quat. "Oh, you're, my name. You don't know who I am ? And quat. So long story short, he'd been maintaining an ongoing relationship with a woman almost 20 years older than me. The night before, she had put a restraining order on him, which he violated the next morning, hence the arrest and $50,000 bond. We were together for 5 years, living together for around 4. I came home from work early. When I got out of my car I saw her peek through the blinds to see who was outside. I walked in the door to her coworker on the couch, obviously uncomfortable and clothes messy and her locked in the bathroom. I wanted to pummel the shit out of him then and there, but he was a trained MMA fighter, and I would've left the house that night with more than a broken heart. Went to a friend's house for a while. They started dating the next day. Shit sucks. It took a while for me to get trust back in relationships. Edit. Her coworker had been to many gatherings, and no, I wouldn't beat a woman's ass even though, yes, she was more deserving. Thank you all for the comments. It was 10+ years ago, and I'm doing good. Funny thing, it was this day 4 years ago that I found out my wife was having an affair with her boss. I knew something was wrong. The way she acted around me was off. I had asked her point blank if she was having an affair with X. She denied it and suggested we go to marriage counseling. I took this as I was doing something wrong and went in hoping to find the issue that could save my marriage. She lied again in the counseling. This went on for about a month and a half. I had Thursdays off of work, so I got up and worked out, did a little bit of cleaning and sat down. That moment my brain went wild with the possibility of her having an affair. So I logged into her Facebook and found the messages between her and ex. I called her crying asking why. She gave me a cold "I don't know" to tell you and hung up. I left the house and went to the bank to get my half of the money. On the way I called an old boss and had a better job in a different city by the end of the day. I am a pretty simple person. I don't ask for much besides trust and truth in a relationship. That was broken now and I was out. I ended up remarrying a wood woman with 2 kids and couldn't be happier. Oh man, I have a winner. I had surgery on my testicles due to a possible tumor. It wound up being benign, so I'm recovering that evening in bed. My girlfriend, long distance, visited me to take care of me. All is going great, except for my balls hurting and my wearing of a diaper, but hey, I had just come back from Afghanistan, so life was still pretty sweet. My girlfriend offers to make me some food. Sweet. So she asks me to look up a recipe on my phone. I can't find my phone, so she tosses me hers. Well, let me tell you, in the midst of me looking up a great chicken cordon bleu recipe, a message from my friend Ryan flashes across the top of the screen. I can't make it out, but it looks an awful lot like a dick. I'm like, oh Ryan, what are you giving a hard time to my girlfriend about? So I clicked the message, if only to relay what I presumed was a joke to her. Well, let me tell you, joke was on me. Those two had been going to Bonetown, USA while I was deployed. They talked about me being gone as a sexcation. My girlfriend asks if I found anything good. I'm like, oh hell yeah ... and quat. Now, I show her the texts. She denies anything happened. Which is, well dumb, so me being a man of dignity, kick her out of the apartment and send her on her way to Georgia. Wearing adult diapers, I kicked a bitch out of my place. Honestly, I just wish I had found out after I had eaten some cordon bleu. I'd been seeing this girl for 8 months, and flowers arrived from a guy called Matt on her birthday, but she managed to convince me he was just a friend. It wasn't a problem as I was finally meeting her family for the first time at her birthday meal that same day, and she dropped the L-bomb a few days before. I stayed at hers after the meal, then left for work in the morning. Later that day I sent her the usual text of when you free next, and then she decided to inform me that Matt was actually her boyfriend of 5 years, and she was moving 300 miles to the house that he had bought for them both, and I would never get to see her again. Safe to say it left me with just a few trust issues. Not me, but a medical resident who I met on rotation recently. One of the nicest guy I ever met, super intelligent and hardworking, and training to be a trauma surgeon by humble as they come. He had been married for 2 years to his wife. One night he gets off a 30-hour call early and heads home to surprise his wife with some flowers and her favorite dessert. It was the anniversary of the day they first met, only to find her in bed with a random dude. He was so exhausted and confused, he didn't know what to do and just left and went back to the hospital. I saw him at 5 a.m., sitting in the parking lot, hunched over crying. He didn't even have his phone with him, he was just sitting there. Man, nothing breaks your heart more than seeing a grown man cry. It's not something you see often. We called his dad up and he came and picked him up. The guy ended up taking a leave from his residency. Turns out, it wasn't the wife's first time sleeping around. Hope he gets back on his feet. He will make an amazing physician. We broke up. I made a new friend and she asked if I had a boyfriend and I told her we had just ended the relationship, but I also told her his name, to which she replied I had a boyfriend with that name too not too long ago. It wasn't a common name in our area, so I laughed and I showed her a picture and she did the same and we stopped laughing. It was the same guy. We both dated him for like 4 months and 2 of those at the same time. I went to her 18th birthday party. I wandered around mingling with all her friends and then I realized I hadn't seen her anywhere in like 45 minutes. I thought nothing of it at first, but then I went downstairs to use the basement bathroom. It was locked. I knocked and I heard a very breathy female voice say, "Occupied. Go away." Since I really had to go, I decided to wait. GF came stumbling out of the bathroom with some guy about 10 minutes later, looking all flustered and stinking of really cheap weed. Apparently, the guy bought himself a bathroom quickie with a few hits of a shitty toke. She made some excuse about how they were just talking and he was an old friend. I shrugged, actually wanting to believe her. But when I went in to finally take a piss, the stupid bitch had forgotten her panties on the bathroom floor. I handed them to her in front of all her friends upstairs and walked out. "Here, you forgot these in the bathroom downstairs." And quat. It was one of those classic zinger moments when you really burned someone, but at the time, I just felt sick and brokenhearted. He went to NYC on a business trip and his phone was constantly going straight to voicemail whenever I called. When I finally got in touch with him, he said that he was having a hard time getting a signal in Midtown Manhattan. So I called his office and asked for him and they were totally confused. It turns out he was in another state visiting someone he met on the internet. His sister, whom I had never met, called me up to tell me no that, while he was across the country visiting them, his ex-wife had driven up there and they were back together. He promised me that wasn't the case, but the sister stealing my number from his phone and calling me sent up red flags, so I broke it off. He called me a few months later and tried to restart our romance. His sister again called to let me know he had remarried said ex-wife. He got really persistent about being into a relationship even though I knew he was married. I don't know why this sister did it, but bless her. I had suspicions prior to me actually finding out, but it's a fun story. I worked the overnight shift at a printing store. My then girlfriend was sleeping soundly at our apartment, or so I thought. At around 3 a.m., she walked in wearing an oversized hoodie and leopard print high heels. I'm a bit puzzled. She looks she's been crying. I ask her what's going on. She says she wrecked her car and needs my keys so she can go home and sleep. I give her the keys and she leaves. I get home at around 8 a.m. She's sleeping. Her purse is on the table. Her phone is there. I reach for her phone. The purse falls sideways out, spills condoms. I unlock her phone and go to her messages. There is a long text conversation between her and another man. She had been cheating for a while. I woke her up and asked that she leave that day. My dad helped me drop her shit off at her grandparents'. She was drunk driving her brand new car home from a party with her other lover when she lost control of her car in a ditch. She reported it as stolen and had a friend give her a ride to my workplace. I've had no contact with her since and I never want to see or hear from her again. I was pregnant with my oldest daughter and had extreme pain one day, so I came home early from work. When I get home I see two purses that I knew weren't mine sitting on the stand. I head to my room to see if my then boyfriend could explain the purses. I'm hearing noises coming from our room. I open the door to peek in and he is having a threesome. I close the door and just go back into the living room. I was shocked. I was supposed to be on bed rest, but I was the only one who had a job, so I was going to school and working while he got to stay home all day. I was livid, but what was scary is that I was so furious that I remained calm. I went into the living room, sat on the couch and waited for them to come out. When they finally did, I asked them if they had fun. I told them they needed to get out of my apartment. He tried to talk to me, but I told him he needed to get out. I calmly packed off of his stuff up, had a friend come over because I couldn't do heavy lifting being 7 months pregnant, and dropped his stuff off at his parents' house that night. It's still shocking to me that I remained so calm being that angry. I had been in a long-term but long-distance relationship with a girl and I truly adored her. We saw each other as often as we could and always made the most of our time together. She traveled with her mom to visit her grandmother, and staying at her grandmother's house was her male cousin who she hadn't seen since they were children. Next time she came to visit me, she planned on taking a detour on her way home to stay with her grandmother and cousin for a few days. She spoke about her cousin a lot and I was genuinely pleased that she had reconnected with him. She was shy and didn't make friends easily. It had been her birthday and I'd bought her lots of nice gifts, including a camera which she'd wanted for a long time. I walked her to the train station and kissed her goodbye and wished her a lovely stay with her grandmother. A couple of days passed and I didn't hear anything from her, which was unusual. I called her mobile phone a few times and sent her text messages just asking if she was okay and got no reply. On the 4th day I called her mom, who I got on with exceptionally well, to ask her if she'd heard from her daughter. She had and couldn't understand why she hadn't called me, so she gave me the home phone number of the grandmother. I called and her grandmother answered. I didn't give my name but asked to speak with my girlfriend, who came straight to the phone, obviously unaware that I'd been given the number. When she heard my voice she went very quiet. I eventually got her to admit that she had feelings for someone, but I naively explained that the only person she'd been spending time with was her cousin. Then the penny dropped and I realized it was him. She eventually admitted that she had been physical with him. Strange, how when I walked her to her train that day and kissed her goodbye as I had so many times before over our 4-year relationship, that it would be the last time I would ever see her. That was 20 years ago and it still hurts. My stepmom did this to her friend that she caught sleeping with my dad. Just wrapped her long hair around her fist a couple times and dragged her down the stairs and out of the house naked. Teen me stayed out of stepmom's way after that. She also found out the babysitter was sleeping with dad too. Babysitter didn't know stepmom knew, and they went shopping one day and my stepmom pushed her in front of a slowing car and broke her leg. Dad got a little pissed about that cause the babysitter also stripped and lived with us, so her income went down. Both babysitter and stepmom were strippers. Being a teen in that house was fucking crazy. My wife cheated and had a 2-year-long affair. I found out when the other man's wife texted me and told me everything. I confronted my wife and she lied through her teeth until I hit her with some facts of the matter that she couldn't deny. We were high school sweethearts that were together for 18 years and married 11 with 2 young kids, 3 and 5. The absolute worst moment of my life, and I've been in a deep depression since finding out. 20 or some odd years ago I caught my ex, not actually having sex, but in bed with another guy, on Valentine's Day, with a dozen roses in my hand. What a horrible person. Fighting would get you kicked out of college, so I told the much smaller guy that as soon as I saw him off campus someday, I'd kill him. 15 years and worlds later, I'm at an engagement party at a bar, and some friends come up and tell me the guy over there is extremely scared of me and thinks I'm going to kill him. I look over and couldn't stop laughing. It was so far in the past, but for some reason, that guy remembered it like I had sworn an oath to avenge my family. It felt good. His fear was redemption enough. Yo, okay, I thought this was just me and that's why I've never told anyone Earl this story. It was so embarrassing. She wasn't my best friend, but we were still pretty close. Then my boyfriend at the time just wrapped an arm around her and started kissing her while I just sat awkwardly next to them. I was so stunned I almost brushed it off before it hit me that oh my god, my boyfriend is kissing another girl in quad. I literally had to walk away to process it, and TBH I don't think they even noticed because it took a bit of time for them to even talk to me about it. My friend walked up to me and I confronted her, asking why TF she would do that with my boyfriend, and she called me a bitch for using the boyfriend card in quad. It's one of the stupidest excuses I have ever heard, and the worst part is that I did feel like a bitch since everyone seemed so calm about it. Turns out that she'd been his side chick as soon as we started dating. Even some of my friends knew, but for some reason they just assumed I was fine with it. Apparently being bisexual means you can't have your boundaries violated. Woo, sorry to unload all this here, but it's incredibly validating to know that I'm not the only one who's experienced something this ridiculous. And it's crazy how shameless they were about it too. I always felt like no one would believe me if I told them, because it just felt so straightforward. I caught my ex when we were both standing in the examining room, getting his UTI treatment in quad. Doc came in and said gonorrhea. He lied for a whole 2 to 3 months I imagine. Even lied about how he got it. Tried convincing me he accidentally swiped his genitals in some mystery fluids in a gas station toilet. What in the world? When he realized I wasn't that stupid, he tried to drink random bottles on the doctor's shelf. He started hitting himself. He fell on his knees sobbing and tried grabbing my hands and begging for me not to leave. He threatened murder-suicide that entire night, and assaulted me for close to 9 hours when I was trying to pack my bags to leave. He choked me in the driveway. I just spoke at his sentencing this Thursday. He is a convicted felon now. I hope he's grown from this. I had a similar experience. Was dating a coworker for barely a month. Things were still very new, but he was full of I think I'm falling in love with you stuff, while I was very cautiously saying we need to take this slow. And quad. A group from work went out after a shift, and I noticed that he was super touchy-feely with Kay, whispering in her ear, pushing her hair back to do so. I thought that was weird and pretty inappropriate, but I was new to dating, so maybe it was just me being insecure? I tried to break up with him a few days after that, pointing out that he clearly wasn't into this relationship anymore. He insisted it was just a busy week and he really wanted to be with me. 2 days later, I walk into the break room, where he and Kay are making out. They pry their faces apart, and this dude chirps, like it was no biggie, "Hey, Brainies and Fire. Kay and I are going to go out to dinner? Do you want to join us?" I was too stunned to do anything but just turn around and walk back out. Later, when I confronted him, he vacillated between the "but we were never officially going together" semantics and trying to gaslight me into believing he'd actually broken up with me sometime before. Is there really something in their brains that convinces them that this kind of behavior is okay? Like, when I said I don't think we should see each other anymore, why didn't he just say okay ? And quad. Boyfriend finally convinces me to have a threesome after months of begging. I finally agree and our mutual friend comes over. Things get hot and heavy and when he starts fucking her he moans, "Damn, you feel even better than usual." Everyone freezes. He tries to tell me that he was thinking about my pussy while fucking her and that it just felt differently, but she felt so guilty that she confessed on the spot and begged me to forgive her. We don't really talk anymore, but last I heard she had been dating my ex for over a year. She had been acting a bit strange and felt like more of a roommate than significant other. I had seen her get some message and try to keep it hidden. At work the next week I guessed her IG password and found blatant message exchanges with her ex plus other men. I immediately started looking for a new place to live and was getting all my things in order when my boss let me go. I waited a few weeks to break up with her while I figured my life out. I was at peace though because I knew she was a horrible person and I also no longer had to deal with my asshole boss. Edit. Since this is getting attention, if you have this miserable experience, just know that the best revenge is to live a full and happy life with absolutely no contact. Drop them out of your life, go find some new hobbies and decide the sort of person you want to be. Developing who you are will eventually lead to understanding when you truly connect with someone. We got married when I was 17, and he was 21. He was shipping off to sea, and I was escaping a bad home life. When he came back after his deployment, he wasn't the same person anymore. After about 6 months, he gained weight on purpose to fail his physical so he'd get kicked out of the Navy. Fast forward a year, I'm working full time, and he is sitting at home, watching anime and drinking during the day, and telling me that he was applying to jobs in quad. I was applying to universities when my laptop died on me. I asked to use his to finish an app, and while doing so a message popped up on his FB. A topless pic of his ex, from her. I was shocked and opened it to find that they'd been dating for a long time, started again while he was at sea in the Navy. He would talk to her and never to me, saying that he never got the time to email. She had sent him a pic because he had said how he missed having big tits like hers to play with, and how mine were just too small so he felt like he was fucking a boy or a child. I confronted him. He made a bunch of pitiful excuses. I had my friends come to the house that day and kick him out while I went to work. He then stalked me for the next few years, and made posts on his FB about how I was a coward. He sent emails and called from blocked numbers to tell me that a restraining order is just a piece of paper or that our vows before God made me his property and shit like that. Then he bought a gun, and started telling our friends that if he can't have me no one can and quat. I ended up talking to our friends, and told everyone conflicting information about where I was going, and moved states. I deleted all my personal social media accounts and lived in fear for years, watching him continually make memes about how he loved his wife and would do anything for her. It took 8 years for me to finally get the divorce from him. My first serious girlfriend after high school worked at an amusement park. I would pick her up after work and we'd hang out because everyone there was pretty cool. We started spending most of our time with another couple and another male employee. One night, it was super late and my girlfriend still hadn't called me to pick her up. She wasn't replying to my texts, so I just started driving there thinking we'd all hang out in the park after hours as usual. I decided to swing by for some McDonald's first, and that's when everything changed. I ended up seeing my girlfriend and her coworker splitting a milkshake. It looked like a scene from a romantic movie. I messaged the couple we were friends with and found out that they had been going on dates for quite some time. Years later, they got married, had a couple of kids, and then got divorced. I haven't stayed in touch with anyone from the park. My ex did reach out on Facebook a couple of years later to see if I was going to our high school reunion. I ignored the message and skipped the reunion. I couldn't live in the past and there was no way I was going to repeat high school. My, now ex-husband demanded constant access to all of my social media and cell phone messages and was constantly accusing me of cheating even though he had no reason to think I would do that. I had nothing to hide. Never even thought of cheating. I was watching our young kids 24/7 and didn't even have transportation since he accidentally totaled my car. One day I handed over my phone for him to check for other men and asked to see his. He hesitated but then handed it over. There was a long, sexual, text history with one of the teenage girls who works for him. He tells me he's in love with her and wants her to move in with us. I was in total shock, dropped his phone cracking it. He retaliated by breaking my laptop. He's a wonderful man and I miss him every day. Sarcasm. I was working 9 to 5, he was unemployed at the time. We didn't exactly live together, but I slept around 4 nights/week at his place. I would cook for him when I got home, did the shopping, all that jazz. One Saturday evening we went to the mall and then to the supermarket and then back to his place. We hadn't seen each other since the previous weekend then, because I was caught up with something at work, felt really tired those days and decided to sleep at my place. Went on the balcony to smoke a cigarette after we arrived and noticed that in the ashtray were a bunch of pink Sobrani cigarette butts. I don't smoke Sobrani, and he didn't smoke. After I finished my cigarette, I asked him if someone had visited him recently. He said no. I mentioned the cigarette butts and then he confessed that he indeed had a girl over that previous week. I felt shattered. I couldn't say a word. He said it was both our faults for that happening, because he felt lonely and needs me around more. I forgave him. Dumped him a few months later, after trying to kick me out of the house at 3 a.m. on a Sunday and then breaking down in tears and apologizing for it a few minutes later. I left for good the following day. 2. I dated this other guy for around 5 months. He was always busy or ill, but always couldn't wait to see me again and quat. Received a call from a good friend one morning, telling me he had seen him with another girl at a bar that my friends frequented, that I frequented, and he knew. After I ended the call with my friend, I did a bit of digging, asked some mutuals, and apparently that girl was his official girlfriend, of more than 1 year, while I was his side chick. What made it worse? She probably knew about me all along because their relationship was more or less open. I confronted him about it via text. He insisted he didn't lie to me. He never told me and hid the truth because I never asked if he was in a relationship. This one really hurt for a while. The other woman came to our house during family night. My dad answered the door and went outside. After 10 minutes I went to see what was taking so long. As soon as I opened the door I hear, "There's your poor wife now." My dad had cheated before, so I tried to stop my mom from coming to the door. Hell ensued and then my dad tried to kill himself in front of all of us. I was 16, so it was pretty traumatic. I met her on a dating site and she lived in a different city. We started texting and calling each other on a daily basis before I went to visit her for a weekend. The trip was great and 2 weeks later, she came to visit me. Everything felt good and we continued dating for a few months. We even took a vacation together and I felt happy. Then, I began to notice that the things she told me didn't always add up. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, but I had this growing, subliminal suspicion that something was wrong. One night, I ended up with her phone in my hand when she went to the bathroom. I looked at the screen and my heart stopped. An email popped up from a guy named Christian. Christian was confirming the flight he had booked for them. I opened it and took a picture with my phone, but didn't confront her immediately and took my time to process. I asked her how many boyfriends she currently had and explained my gut feelings. She admitted to dating other people but told me nothing was as serious as what we had. Then, I told her I knew about Christian and said he deserved to know about me. Immediately, she got emotional, begging me to leave him out of this and saying through tears that they had plans. I ended things that day and wrote an email to Christian that night. He didn't know she was seeing other partners either and found out she had been dating both of us at the same time. Had a guy cheat on me, guess he got a foot job from a girl. He recorded it, then had the stupidity to save the video to my computer. I found it one day by accident. In my WTF moment, I took a screenshot and put it as the desktop background pic. He came in, went to use the computer, saw the background pic, looked at me, started collecting his shit, and left. I honestly don't remember if we even spoke that day. I'm sure he didn't expect I'd find it. Oops. She left to go on a camping trip for a few weeks. A week and a half into her trip she posts a Snapchat from Florida of some other dude hugging her from behind in a hotel room mirror. Apparently during this camping trip she met some guy who God had put in her path. She wasn't religious, and that, after only knowing each other for a couple days, they were now dating and decided to go to Florida together. I had to wait an additional week for her to tell me this cause she wasn't answering her phone or texts. It's been about a year and as far as I know they're still dating. Still boggles my mind to this day. Ah man. This is gonna be a long one but stick around, it's worth it. So I was 18 at the time. And I wasn't being forced to move out, but my girlfriend at the time was, so we ended up getting a place together because she couldn't do it on her own. So me and this girl had gotten a place together in September of whatever year it was. Well, this particular situation happened in, I'd say, May, October or November of the same year. So, me and my girlfriend worked different shifts. She worked first shift, 7 3:30 p, Monday through Friday, and I worked 6 4 p Saturday to Tuesday. One of the days I wasn't working I wake up early, make sure she got her shit for work and stuff before I lay back down and enjoy my day off. That was pretty much my routine when I wasn't working. When she left I would grab her iPad and play games, cause the screen was much bigger than my phone. Anyone who has multiple Apple products know that if you have your iMessage linked to either an iPod or an iPad then you can send or receive messages to other iPhone users. I'm an Android guy, but I've had my fair share of iPhones etc. So as I'm playing a game, an iMessage came through which wasn't uncommon because she texted her family and friends and shit, so I didn't pay it any mind. Kept playing my game like normal. Then another message comes through. Mind you, it's all of 6 a.m. and she's texting her ass off, which is uncommon. I never been the type to go through phones. If I don't trust you I don't want to be with you. At all. A couple hours go by and I wake up from a lil nap or whatever you want to call it, and there were loads of unread messages on the iPad, but when I unlocked it it went straight to the messages of her texting her ex-boyfriend. And the timestamps began the night before. Did a few calculations and realized that she was texting the dude while we were grocery shopping. So I asked her and she lied, of course. Then she stopped and her face dropped. I'm assuming this is the moment she realized I had seen everything. Her name was also on the lease of the apartment. FFWD to a couple days later. She packs her shit and leaves the apartment and moves back home with her grandparents. So me being the guy I am, the day after she leaves, I go down to the leasing office and pay like $300, $400 to get my name taken off the lease, packed the remainder of what was in the apartment and moved back home with my dad. Her name was still on the lease and she got evicted a couple months later. She didn't however learn that until she attempted to get another place and they denied her because of a prior eviction. So she sues me and tries to take me court for it. Well, she lost and got stuck with $3,000 for unpaid rent, late fees, etc. Her credit was the definition of fucked. And she earned every point it dropped. Because she wanted to be a slut. Good times. Oh boy, story time. So, I'd been with this girl for 2 years. I was madly in love with her. I was going to propose. Bought a ring, went to pay her a surprise visit, walked in because I had a key, found her in bed with another man. Threw the box with the ring at her, walked out, drove off, never looked back. Got about 5 miles away, pulled over and broke down crying. My partner and I at the time were temporary long distance as he lived 2 states up from me. For 2 years, we had a pretty solid relationship. Though we did have a rocky beginning. I had been struggling mentally and he was too, and my parents were well aware of our struggles in our partnership. The last time I ever saw him, he came to visit on New Year, from 2019 to 2020. After he left, everything seemed perfectly fine. Long story short, my former roommate called me to check in on me. I had wanted to take a semester break and went back home from college, and spoke in a voice that made me instantly feel something was very, very wrong. My partner had made a Tinder account, and for all I know, he could have been seeing someone, talking to someone, or at the very least, looking for someone else as a safety net. I was completely shattered and so was my trust. It might seem like a small thing that maybe I shouldn't have broken up with him over, but I felt betrayed, especially knowing when I asked him, the last time we ever called, if he would break up with me over that if the situation was reversed, and he told me he would have broken up with me had he found out I had a Tinder profile. And he told me early on that cheating was a deal breaker. Needless to say, I broke up with him for good and have not talked to him since. My ex-wife and I went up to Big Bear to go snowboarding and spend some time together. We were having issues and I thought it'd be fun to get away and do something fun together. Let's just say it did not go well. She said she grew up snowboarding but she never made it down a hill and had a terrible time. So we went back to the cabin and she was pretty much just on her phone, not talking to me. We make it back and she says she needs to just shower and be alone for a bit. She goes off and I just hang in the den. She left her phone in her purse and it just kept buzzing. So I checked it out because what if someone was trying to reach us or something? I open it up to read a full conversation between her and this guy. It wasn't good. I read how that day's text started and they started really early in the morning. Hope you're doing okay up there. And quat. We'll see, doubt it. He's trying too hard. He should just know it really doesn't matter. Wish I was up here with you instead. A pic of her. And quat. Just the worst stuff. And that was before I even woke up. I was pretty devastated and really didn't know what to do. I knew I didn't want to fight because I realized she wasn't worth fighting for. Grabbed my bag, and drove back to San Diego. I took her phone with me so I could text him and tell him we're coming home early. Let's meet. And quat. I ended up inviting him to a coffee shop and waited for him to show up. When he walked through the door, he saw me immediately and kind of stopped. I waved him over and wasn't too far from the door so I told him we need to talk. He comes over and already front loads with the, "It's not what you think, blah blah bullshit." I told him that he wants her. He can take his sorry ass to Big Bear and go get her. Because I was leaving and we're through. See you when we sign the papers. And I left. Second worst day of my life, but I'm glad it happened. Met my lady 3 years later and have now been together for 4 years and now engaged. I don't know if you ask this because you yourself are going through this and need comfort and to know what to do. But I hope this is just a hypothetical question, and if not, there are better partners out there for us. You just need to let life introduce you to them. 3 years ago, my, then, girlfriend and I went to a party of a mutual friend, and I went to go get us drinks. I came back and heard her voice coming from the closet. I opened the door and saw her shirtless and making out with her ex-boyfriend. I wish I could say I punched him in the face or something awesome, but that just isn't me. I just left with my best friends and went out for coffee. A handful of months later, I asked out one of my biggest crushes from high school and she said yes. We've been dating for 2 years now, and I couldn't be happier. I was at Disney, with our kids, day 2 of a 7-day family trip her father had been, by that point, talking up for about 7 years. He and her mother told us when the kids were born, they were going to take us all to Disney when they turned 7. And 7 years later, it finally happened. At that point, we'd been together for over a decade. Had a great job, a house, bunch of kids, and the full-on, 100%, honest-to-goodness American dream. Life was grand. Until I picked up her phone to set an alarm on night 2 of our family vacation of a lifetime. There were so many texts. So many. I remember actually wanting to hurt her, and having to leave the room. I immediately called the number and heard some fucking strange dude answer with a sleepy, "Hello darling. I'm glad to hear from you. And quat. I wanted to die. The sense of unreality that I experienced. It was immediately numbing. Like I'd just switched to the dark timeline. All I could think was, from this point on, everything that I have known about my left, is going to change. And quat. I had been cheated on a few times, but never with a serious relationship. So was it really cheating? But regardless, my GF had a studio apartment and lived alone. I came over and went pee at some point. I saw a condom in the toilet. She and I only used condoms our first time. Additionally, I hadn't been over in a week, so. Another time I knew the guy she was cheating on me with. So. Another time she used me to get invited to a party that her ex was apparently at. They banged in one of the bedrooms while I was wondering where she was. Friend of mine, apartment renter, went into that room, where they stored the weed, and caught them. So, I have also been the other guy. Once I was dating a girl who would periodically disappear for a week or two, explaining it away as studying for finals and quat. I ran into a friend of hers one day who told me that she has a BF in the Peace Corps, and would go to him every time he came home. I also hooked up with a girl at a wedding, which was cool. She then, some time later, decided to have another go, and we had a no dating one another agreement. Well, she started dating a guy, and was quite sweet. Kiss him on the cheek at the end, then come over to my house. We broke it off when they got more serious, but that was a funny chapter. Quite amicable. Still felt bad though. Ex-wife actually asked me for her blessing to commit adultery with another married man. She was shocked when I said I don't support it. She went ballistic, has severe mental health issues, went and did it anyway and ended up in a psych ward. 2 marriages ended and now the 2 cheaters are engaged. Little devastated at first. Blessing in disguise. I was living abroad, so we were doing long distance. He visited me, then less than a month after he went back home, an old coworker/friend told me she saw him at a bar kissing and holding hands with another girl. She confronted them and he was saying that's his best friend who is also in a relationship. That other girl ended up being my brother-in-law's friend's girlfriend. Lamau, it was so messy. Edit, I'm just gonna add that I paid for his plane ticket to come see me as well as lending him a bunch of spending money. He didn't pay me back for a long ass time, and overall I probably only got half of it back. I know that's my own stupidity too, but it just made the situation so much shittier. My husband of a few months was complaining of a painful lump on his ball sack. Me being a nurse, I of course rattled off all the things it could, really and not really be, just to freak him out. It was just an ingrown pube, but so it seems that's a pretty painful spot for you dudes, so he was being a pansy about letting me treat the area. So I started joking around about STDs and how his balls were going to fall off. He got really quiet and didn't think that was very funny. We had not had sex in several months. I was 7 months pregnant with naturally conceived twins and sex was incredibly painful and unadvised by our specialist. Well, I suggested he take a warm compress on the area and see if that helped the discomfort. While Hess in the bathroom cradling his Baileys in a warm wash rag, he gets a bunch of texts from a chick say, "No, we have been tested in the last few months. No STDs. Can't be from me." I got the whole body shut down, room closing in on me, tunnel vision, enough strength to get into bed and just lay there. My husband of 4 months, we'd been together for several years and had a 2-year-old son too, was screwing another woman. He could tell something was wrong when he saw me. The only thing I could say was, "Who's so and so and why are you talking to her about STDs?" And that's when it all fell apart. I had no one to confide in for support. My family was providing us with so much, a house, money, everything to take care of these twins, and this man was just horny, so he went and got some. I couldn't and still haven't told my parents. I told my best friend and confided in my brother, because he cheated on his wife and I wanted the man's perspective. Some might not agree with it, but we are still together today. We have learned communication is so important, even if it's a note or text or something. We need to know each other's needs and be honest about how we feel. The dynamic of our marriage will never be that of what I wanted it to be. I didn't wear a ring for a long time. I don't trust him still when it comes to relationships with female-only friends, and I still have not taken his name after 3 years. As of right now, we need to be married to provide for our children. We are happy, our children are happy. We don't fight and we have fun, love and affection. But it's always there and it always will be. When our 3 sons decide to marry, he will tell them what he did and how much it jeopardized what is supposed to be a union between 2 people. Because our marriage is a marriage of 2 people who work together to raise a family, but we are a happy, healthy and loving family. She was driving and handed me her phone so I could navigate the directions. While I was holding her phone, she got a message from another guy. I had already told her their friendship made me uncomfortable and she said I had nothing to worry about. But then I read the message and I broke down. He wanted to know what time to pick her up for their date. I calmly asked her how I should respond. My coworker's mom apparently realized her husband was cheating after she saw his Harley at a bar. Apparently he loved the bike more than her and it was very custom and recognizable. Later she rammed her car into it and filed for divorce. Edit, he was also abusive and got her addicted to cigarettes and drugs. The implication was that it was completely justified, and the cheating was just the last straw. My best friend accidentally let it slip in a FB message, because she thought I already knew. I had had my suspicions but never any proof. When I confronted my wife, she tried to say the guy raped her. He didn't, and I lost my shit because that is not something you fucking lie about. When I didn't buy that lie, she just kept producing more until finally she confessed. I stayed with her for another 7 years, but our relationship never recovered after that because she's a raging narcissist who can't handle making mistakes. I left her in March of 2017. Within 2 months she was shacked up with someone else and raising their kid. She hates children, also bought herself 2 new dogs to replace the dogs we had together. Fucking sucked to just realize she never gave a shit about me or our family and doesn't want to be alone. Just found a replacement family like ASAP. I'm still single and frankly I prefer it this way, even though it still hurts. Edit. Fuck you, Courtney. The dogs and I are doing just fine. I was married. Out of the blue while at work I get an email that says, husband's name, wife. When I open the email it lists off a name and says, husband's name, married to her. Check on Facebook. English was not the first language, this was overseas. So I do, and what do I see? Tons and tons and tons and tons of pictures of a woman with my husband. The woman and her kids with my husband. The woman and her family with my husband. I was stunned to say the least. It was October 6, 2017, 7 months after I almost died from an ectopic pregnancy. Yep, we were trying at that point to have kids. After work I went home and started throwing all of his stuff in the dumpster. He was out of town at the time, so I had plenty of time to do it. Spent all of Saturday and Sunday throwing everything he owned in the dumpster. A month later I moved to a new apartment and waited until then to tell him I was divorcing him. He then killed himself a few months later. So I had a girlfriend that didn't have a phone and would contact me from other people's if she needed. One day when trying to get a hold of her I texted some of the most recent ones she contacted me from and got a reply saying, bro, you need to fuck off. She broke up with you and is seeing someone else, so leave her alone. And quote. This was far from true. We had not broken up and had plans to go on her dream vacation to Italy for her birthday the next week. I dumped her, went to with my friend instead, haha. We were engaged, and it was about 4 months to the wedding. It was her birthday, and a Friday. We had both wanted to see Blue Man Group for a while, so I had ordered tickets for us. Being a Friday, I took off half a day to surprise her. When I arrived home, there was an unknown car in the drive, and the garage was open, which was extremely unusual. It also happened to bypass the security camera we had facing the front door. I go in through the garage to hear the unmistakable sounds of lovemaking in our bedroom. I ended our relationship then and there, which her family claimed broke her. The last time I looked her up a couple of years ago, she had had 2 kids with 2 different guys, and had spent time in prison. It was a small town, so no surprises there. Her family still made me out to be the bad guy in the relationship when I ended it because I didn't forgive her. Worst of all, I never did get to see Blue Man Group in person. Our relationship was pretty fresh. Then one time we met up with a bunch of friends and I struck up a conversation with one of them. I introduced myself as her boyfriend and then he said, "Oh, so you must be Jake. My name is Anthony." I found out he was cheating shortly after I found out I was pregnant, so honestly he probably could have gotten away with it even longer. At the time I was going through all sorts of weird emotions, so I pushed off the weird vibes I was getting as things are weird, right? Meow. You're reading too much into it. And quote. When I think back on it, I'm not sure what exactly tipped me off. Days before it was confirmed I realized he was suddenly taking phone calls from someone who, when he spoke to them, was apparently so important that he was talking low and chuckling all flirty, and he made sure to be on the phone only when I wasn't in the room. Then she called while we were in the middle of a serious "what are we gonna do about this baby" kinda talk, and seeing her name/picture pop up on his phone set off an alarm in my gut, but I couldn't place the feeling. Finally I just straight up asked if he was fucking around with the girl. He denied it, turned it on me, end of convo. Few days later he left his phone in the bathroom and that nagging feeling was still there. So I bit the bullet and checked his phone. There were hundreds of texts to slash from her, lots of sexual stuff and I love yous. Turned out I was the other bitch, and he had a 3 years long distance thing going on with this other girl. I was devastated. My wife told me she was driving to Pittsburgh from our home in Virginia to see an old mutual friend of ours. I knew she had a friend that I was suspicious about that lived a bit further north in New York, but it wasn't until I got a call from my bank asking to confirm the charges that I realized she not only went straight to New York, none of the charges on the card were for a hotel. Edit. To add a backstory, she started as the operations manager for a big box store, and this kid was one of her employees. They began to secretly flirt with each other behind my back. I knew of this guy, but didn't know what they were up to, thinking she just had to work late and quote. A few months later, he gets accepted to a college in Syracuse, New York and had to move into his dorm. Again, I knew about this because she at least told me that in passing when I asked about her day at work. Something about being proud of one of her employees. She became reclusive, spending most of her time texting someone and guarding her phone. I should have known better, but I was young and naive, convinced she would never do anything to hurt me. A few months later she plans a trip to see a mutual friend of ours, but didn't invite me, which was strange seeing as it was a family friend. I got a call from the bank to verify charges, and that's when I discovered that she'd been in Syracuse the whole time and never rented a hotel. I couldn't find my then wife after she got off work one afternoon/evening. I tried to call her cell phone with no answer. She didn't show up to the house until 9:30 p.m. She weaved some tale about getting stuck in traffic. I did some sleuthing and pulled the State Farm Good Driving app up, which tracks your movements. I found out she had been leaving work early, going to the nearby rest area off of the expressway, and having sex with a 20-something trucker she met at her previous job. I decided to interrupt the festivities one afternoon. I showed up to the rest area, parked in front of his rig, and jumped right up to the door. The cabin shade was drawn. I withdrew the shades and saw my loving ex-wife with a meth pipe in her hand and was going to town on this guy. He had the gall to tell me to give them privacy. I didn't handle it very well. I called the cops, they both were arrested for possession, and I promptly filed for divorce. The icing on the cake is that a few months after I left, she cheated on her new trucker friend and is well on her way to her 7th friend and quat. Godspeed, you wet, musty nightmare. When my mom was dying in the hospital, I needed someone to talk to. I texted my girlfriend and got a few one-word responses. About an hour before that, she sent me a selfie of herself saying she got her hair cut, wanting to know what I thought. It wasn't like her to send such short responses, especially after telling her that I just saw my mom throwing up blood in the hospital. The following weekend I went to her house. We had planned on working on her yard together. I helped her plant a few things and fixed a few issues on the outside of her house. I spent most of the day doing yard work. The next day we had planned to go bike riding a couple of towns over. I asked if she wanted to spend the night at my house. She said she had been working hard all week and just wanted to sleep in her own bed alone. I went home. At 4:30 that morning my mom died. I went to the hospital. I saw her body for the last time. My girlfriend called me at 6 a.m. saying her car had been vandalized. She said she got a call from her friend Tom saying that he wanted to have a beer. She went over to hang out with him and his kids. She said that was the first time she had been to his house in years. Someone spray painted "Stop fucking Tom" on the side of her car. Slashed her tires. She wouldn't really talk about how my mom had just died. Things didn't add up. I copied the picture she sent the week before to my computer. Check the metadata in the picture. Her phone tags her pictures with GPS coordinates. She was at Tom's house. She had been going there regularly over the past few weeks. Several of her selfies were of her in her car in his driveway. I ended the relationship. She was dumbfounded. All she cared about was fixing her car and the new issue she had. Didn't seem to talk about my mom dying. I ended up giving a eulogy to a bunch of empty chairs. No one bothered to show up to my mom's funeral. My mom was the last family member I had. My ex sent a text months after that asking me to meet her so she could apologize. I didn't respond. That was over 4 years ago now. I've given up dating completely since then. I have no desire to be with anyone anymore. And this one time. At band camp. I was 14-15 years old. My best friend, let's call her Emma, and I were dating 2 boys who were best friends. Typical, right? So, one day Emma and I get out of rehearsal and we go to meet up with our boyfriends, who are nowhere to be found. So we look harder, we're wandering around campus, and we hear low voices behind a ledge. Lo and behold, our precious boyfriends were there. Making out with each other. Emma immediately started crying, which caused the boys to pull apart with a suctiony schluerp. I suppose I wasn't as in love with boyfriend as I thought, because my reaction was to laugh hysterically. I had never seen 2 boys make out before. It wasn't bad. I was in Denver for a month for work. When I got home, we had a date night planned, but she called me crying and confessed that she'd been with someone else while I was out of town. As it turns out, someone was actually her ex-husband. It also turns out, I dodged a major bullet there because a few months later she called me to tell me that she found out she had herpes. I got checked out and I did not have it, so she did me a huge favor by not having sex with me again after getting back with her ex. The husband of one of the women he was cheating on me with called me at work. At first I didn't believe him and hung up. How could the man I spent the past 8 years with, had 2 beautiful babies with, suffered together the loss of one of those children do something so hurtful? Still a part of me had doubt. He had affairs in other relationships and we had a rocky patch early in the beginning where I suspected an affair but didn't have proof. I told my boss I felt sick and had to leave early, and I called this guy back and found out that my ex and his wife along with one of their friends were all sleeping together for about a year. He had confronted my ex and told him that he was going to tell me, but my ex convinced him to wait a month since my mother had just died. I took my time coming home and confronted him and told him to pack and leave. Since I've pieced together a lot of what happened and all the lies he told me, where if I was in a different headspace I might have caught on to the affairs earlier. I also found videos hidden on one of our computers and found out he was having booty calls in our apartment while I was at work and he was watching our daughter. At that point it put the headstone on any possibility of reconciliation. My ex was involved in a motorcycle accident and he broke his back. I was handling all of his paperwork and insurance claims while he was a bit out of it. I needed some information from his phone and found out he was talking to another girl when I was gone for a week. He feigned confusion, but I think reality hit when I walked out the door. A friend of mine was suspicious of her husband cheating, as he went to play soccer with friends way too often. He always came already showered as he would sweat playing. One day she sewed his soccer socks together, and when he came back all showered she saw the socks were still sewed, so he wasn't playing soccer at all. Edit 2. Wow, this blew up. Many people are commenting how this doesn't prove he was cheating, just that he was lying. She later confronted him and he was indeed cheating. Also, Many are saying clean socks would have been enough evidence. And that's true. I guess she didn't think that deep about it. She was texting this dude a lot when she was at my place one day. She said he was just a friend. They met at a party the prior weekend. I didn't believe he was just a friend, but I wasn't going to fight with her about suspicions. Suddenly she wanted to break up with me and I said cool, whatever, have a nice life. A week later she tried to get back with me because things didn't work out with Andrew. I told her I'd only take her back if she was honest with me, and she admitted she made out with him the night they met at that party. I said I guess we're both liars now and blocked her phone number. Via a blog post where she detailed everything that happened and how she found real love in the world. I'd give she didn't remember I was signed up for her blog or didn't care. She had left early for a week-long business trip with the guy and had written the blog post shortly after she landed. Let's just say I sent her things while she was still in the hotel. First girlfriend cheated on me and accidentally mentioned the guy that she told me not to worry about. After poking and prodding at the topic, she admitted it, and admitted that she felt like it was okay for her to do that while we were dating, but also mentioned that I shouldn't try anything similar, or it would be over. I dumped her pretty much immediately after. Second girlfriend is kinda iffy. We mutually agreed on splitting up because we could tell it wasn't going very well. A couple days later, she was posting pictures from a date she was on with another dude that she had been hanging out with while we were dating. She acted really weird towards the end of our relationship, so my guess is that she was with him, but I have no proof. Third girlfriend was cheating on me with multiple girls. Found out because she was low-key bragging about it on occasion. She implied I was homophobic if I wasn't okay with her joking around with her friends just because she was bi. Took me the better part of a year to see the flaws with that one, unfortunately. Called her out on it with some assistance from a trusted neutral party. But by that point we were kinda toast already for other reasons, so I decided that the cheating didn't sit right with me whatsoever and ended it. I'm doing my best here, boys. Early 20s, we were a volatile on and off relationship, very toxic and unhealthy, that went in for several years even with her living with me and my family. Anyway, we had a break for a couple of days then missed each other, so she met up with me at my school parking lot. I proceeded to rail the shit out of her in the back seat as we were both pretty pent up, then had to go to class. She called me afterwards, I guess feeling guilty, and was dancing around the topic quite a bit even though there was something very clearly wrong. Asked her what was going on directly, the silence confirmed it. To be honest, I was pretty devastated. But not devastated enough because we kept screwing in cars even as she had pretty much left me for that dude. I'd consider her my first love even as fucked up of a relationship as it was. She got into alcohol and then drugs really badly, cocaine, then crack, and kind of went insane. It was a hell of an experience that I reflect back on now in awe, but emotionally it was pretty brutal when it was happening. My then wife told me a guy from work was stalking her. So I, like a good husband, told him I knew what the fuck he was doing and he needs to stay the fuck away from my wife or else. He had no idea my wife had accused him of stalking her. She was just trying to get me to get rid of him for her. He assumed I was talking about the affair they were apparently having. It freaked him out and he immediately went home to his wife and confessed to the affair he was having with my wife, never even understanding that I was trying to scare off what I believed was her stalker. They had been having an affair for a while. The dude's wife called me in tears and asked if I knew about what was going on. It was a confusing conversation as we both thought different things. Divorced now. Much happier. She didn't log off her Facebook profile on my computer, and as we shared lots of common friends it took me a minute to realize I was not on my session. I received a weird messenger message of a girl asking me how was it last night? Did you stay with him after I left? Did he finally see your underwear? I was highly confused, then it all made sense. I went for a run, waited for her to wake up, and we broke up without even mentioning it. 3 years after and she still doesn't know that I know. We were both miserable anyway. I wasn't even pissed, just shocked by the brutal end of this relationship. Got engaged the summer after I graduated college, after having been together for 5 years. I had to move away from home for 6 months for work that next December. I noticed she started acting really withdrawn and my attempts to talk to her on the phone while I was away were spun as smothering her, which set up some major red flags. I will shamefully admit I started doing some shady shit to confirm my suspicions, checking the phone bill for numbers she was texting and looking through her emails. Anyway, after like a month, in January, I found an email in her sent mailbox to a dude saying how even though she's in a relationship, she wants to be the fun girl and all these other fucked up things. It crushed me. I had this intuition 4 years ago to check my ex's email. There was nothing strange about his behavior and we weren't going through a rough patch. It was just a strong urge to log in. We had each other's passwords and when I opened his inbox, there was an email from his ex. He had responded to it that morning telling her how much he missed what they had. I may or may not have carried a heavily intoxicated girlfriend and a large amount of substances out of my boss's house, CEO of a very large company, while she was covered in her own filth so his wife wouldn't catch him as she arrived home from her sister's house a day early. How did this happen, you ask? My old boss regularly cheated on his wife with any number of women. Well, he calls me one day, because we are friends away from work, and asks me to come to his apartment ASAP. I drive over there, and he's blitzed, and this chick is laying naked in her own filth mumbling about something. He says he has to shower and clean up because his wife is 10 minutes away, so please get that out of here and quat. I grab the girl and help her to her feet and cover her up with a t-shirt. As I'm walking her out, he yells for me to grab the party bag. The only bag is a dop kit. I grab it, jump in my car and drive off. This girl is blasted. She doesn't know where she lives and is sure she's having a heart attack. So, I calm her down somewhat and reach in her purse and find her ID. Luckily, she has her current address on it, and I take her home. I drive back to my house and pull into the driveway and remember the dop kit. I open it up and there's a lot of illegal substances in there. I got a steak dinner and a few beers later that week from the boss. Needless to say, I no longer work there. We were in college and she told me she was pregnant. We weren't sure what to do besides schedule a doctor's appointment. I was all in for her, ready to step up to the plate for her and our child, until the doctor told us a key piece of information that turned everything upside down: the estimated date of conception. I realized that I was out of town during those dates, so I questioned her about it. She confessed to sleeping with my roommate while I was out of town. We had been married for a few years and it was great, but once we had a baby, he panicked. All of a sudden he didn't know what he wanted. Eventually, he asked me for space. We still spoke, but he wasn't involved with our baby or fixing our marriage. 10 months later, I added a new Amazon Echo to our family Prime account and I noticed a device I didn't recognize. I figured out that the device was set up at the place where he was currently living. Since it was linked to our account, I was able to go through voice requests and play them back. One recording sent chills up my spine. It was my husband saying, "Alexa, play beautiful love songs," while in the background I can hear intimate noises. Turns out, he was having an affair with a colleague. They'd been having an affair since at least the birth of our daughter, but lots of clues say it started before. It was easier to end it considering how long he had already been gone. When I originally shared this on social media, it got picked up by a tabloid newspaper with the headline "Amazon Slimeball," which is now what he has saved as in my contacts forever. We went to my grandmother's for Christmas dinner like we did every year. This night, though, my uncle on my dad's side drank too much and kind of hinted that he had an affair with my mother. A couple of months and 2 DNA tests later, we found out my sister is actually his daughter. My dad never spoke to his brother again, and of course, my parents got divorced, and I needed a lot of therapy. And chocolate. Gosh, we are trash. This guy posted about how his girlfriend of 3 years was cheating on him. Oh, but it got so much worse. He displayed a picture of the guy she was with, tagged his girlfriend, and held super personal discussions on this post. No more than 2 hours later, he says that people need to leave him alone, that him and his girlfriend will figure it out on their own, and that these matters are personal. The wife cheated on her husband during his frequent travels for work. She was the one who filed for divorce, and she got to keep the house. Months elapse and the husband is still furious, rightfully so, but has no recourse. Then he has an epiphany. I wonder if she changed the password to the Nest thermostat? She did not. For the next year, he continues to mess with the thermostat. In the middle of summer when they're sleeping in his bed, he turns the heat on to 90 degrees at 3 a.m. Middle of winter? Time to shut off the heat and hope the pipes freeze. Away on vacation? Turn the air conditioning down to 55 and let it run 24/7 for a nice surprise bill when they get home. I knew my ex-wife was cheating but didn't tell her that I knew. Took her out for a dinner date and I casually asked questions about who she had been spending time with while I was at sea. She barely worked, so she had to spend her time doing something. She failed to mention the guy that had been staying at my house for nearly 2 months, the guy she had to call the cops on just to get to leave because I was coming home in 2 days. So I slid her a copy of the police report that was filed for the incident and watched as she crumbled over the fact she had been caught, and I didn't have to say a word. My college roommate secretly slept with my boyfriend while I was at class for a year. I routinely took more than a full course load and was in math/science classes or study groups every morning. One day I walked in on them screwing when class was cancelled. Moved out, more angry at her than heartbroken. Lost most of my friends through the breakup. Fast forward 5 years later, those two throw a crazy expensive engagement party at the guy's parents' beach house, attended by some still mutual friends. She caught him boning one of the waitresses for the catering company in a bathroom before the toasts. They still got married. Like op, I feel a little bad for her despite the karma balance. She feels like she can't do better than being with a cheater. He is rich, though.